Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.
This is Gala Avery reporting to you from inside the Video Archive Cinema Club, the 20-seat secret cinema located within the Vista. Today, Video Archive Cinema Club manager Matt Landsman and I are joined by a very special guest to chat about the calendar for the week of November 25th. He needs no introduction, but we love him so much that he's getting one anyway. He's the owner of the New Beverly Cinema and the Vista, an Academy Award-winning writer and director, and one of the hosts of the Video Archives podcast. You guessed it, we are joined by none other than Quentin Tarantino.
Hello, Gala. Good to be here. Hello, Matt.
Thanks for coming, Quentin.
Good to be here.
No, I'm so excited that Quentin's finally in the little theater with us talking about the calendar, and what a week to come in and talk about stuff, especially because there are a few gemstones on this calendar that I'm just so excited for you to be here to lend your wisdom to.
Yes, I've been enjoying what you guys have been doing so far, but this was one of the ones where I wanted to be here because I didn't select everything playing here, but the majority of it, the majority of the week is my programming.
So before we begin, I would like to issue a formal apology because despite my countless hours talking about women in cages, I made a major error and credited the movie to Cirio H. Santiago on last week's episode. Jerry DeLeon is obviously the director of Women in Cages, and he does such a great job of it. So my apologies for the misinformation that I have now spread.
Well, just to take you off the hook a little bit, not that you deserve to be taken off the hook, but just to take you off just a little bit, you picked the one women in prison movie that Cirio H. Santiago or Eddie Romero didn't direct. All right, it was sort of like a lightning bolt picking a random passerby.
Yeah, but somehow I've talked about it on Video Archives. I've talked about it in private with people, and just that day I decided to be like, you know what? I think that Cirio H. Santiago directed this, but just shows you.
I like the fact that you made it a point about the H.
Yeah, I was very specific. So now let's get into the calendar for this week. So on Tuesday, the 26th at 2 p.m., we have Navy Blue and Gold and Fast Company.
Navy Blue and Gold. Sam Wood directed this one, and it's one of two movies that were playing at the same time starring Florence Rice. And I really enjoyed this movie. It has Jimmy Stewart, it has Robert Young, and Tom Brown is the third guy. And they're three football-playing guys who end up in the Midshipmen's Navy Academy together.
Annapolis, yeah.
And they end up being roommates, and everybody sort of punches down a little bit on Tom Brown because he's like the short guy, but he comes from this rich family, and Florence Rice is his sister, and the two other guys see a picture of her basically in his effects, and they both develop crushes on her. And when they go home to visit his sort of mansion for Christmas, they're both sort of vying for her affection. But there's a lot of other things going on in this movie that are really great, including this whole subplot with Jimmy Stewart's father, which ends up being like the emotional core of the movie.
Yeah. I discovered this movie this year because my favorite screenwriter is a screenwriter named George Bruce. And this is the movie that he'd done one other thing before this as a screenwriter that I haven't been able to track down. But this is really officially the movie that brought him to Hollywood. And then he wrote like 30 scripts or so. And that's 30 scripts that were actually made. Forget about the ones that he did that weren't made, which I have a bunch of his unmade scripts.
Oh, do you
too.
really?
Yeah.
What's the movie that you haven't been able to track down of his?
I think it's called Half a Sinner. It's like an Ann Dvorak film, which it's his first official credit.
Mm-hmm.
But this brought him to Hollywood in a big way because Navy Blue and Gold, before George Bruce started writing movie scripts, he was famous for writing pulp magazine stories. And his big forte was World War I aviation pulp stories. And so much so that he had 4 different magazines named after him. George Bruce Airhawks, George Bruce Thrilling Air Stories. They refer to him as the ace of World War I aviation stories. He even had a weekly radio show called George Bruce's Thrilling Stories of the Air, where his stories were acted out. And I played one of them for Roger, and Roger just never stops talking about it.
Of course, because my dad loves pilot stories.
Yeah.
It's a very family thing. I mean, people will hear on the Great Waldo Pepper episode.
Yeah.
My dad go on and on and on.
No,
about
that's
flying
why I
aces.
send it to him. I send him a written story, and I sent him one of the episodes, and he just brings it up all the time. And like George Bruce later will write my favorite screenplay of all time, which is his version of Man in the Iron Mask, which is the version that we all know, not the terrible Dumas novel, but his version of the story. And then he also wrote Son of Monte Cristo, which, even though I'm saying Man in the Iron Mask is my favorite screenplay, Son of Monte Cristo might be even just a little teeny tiny bit touch better. But his route to Hollywood officially started when he was writing for Argosy magazine, which was a big pulp magazine in the 20s. He wrote a serialized story called Annapolis Ahoy. And it was really, really, really popular. I think you probably serialized to about like 4 different issues. And it was so popular that he said, oh, well, maybe I should take this story and turn it into a novel. And he turned it into the novel, which is Navy Blue and Gold, which was, not only was it popular, it is read by people who go to Annapolis to this day.
Wow.
It is considered the great book about Annapolis, and cadets still read it to this day. They read Navy Blue and Gold. That's the book. That's the book to read about Annapolis. Excuse me while I have a delicious sip of Pam's coffee. Okay. So MGM bought the rights to Navy Blue and Gold and hired George Bruce to adapt it, which is kind of a thing. You know, normally either they wouldn't trust, especially somebody who didn't really have super experience writing screenplays, they wouldn't trust them to adapt their own book. Or if they did, they'd attach him with with one of their bungalow screenwriters. That's not the case with Navy Blue and Gold. It's just completely George Bruce adapting it himself. And part of their jumping off point was a big hit around this exact same time. It follows a similar structure to some degree, is Yank at Oxford with Robert Taylor and Lionel Barrymore. And so they were thinking about that a little bit, that was one of the things that they were thinking about in turning Navy Blue and Gold into a feature. And so they put like their 2 big stars, two of their big young leading men who they were really hot on, both Jimmy Stewart and Robert Young in the cast. Tom Brown, who was actually quite popular in his day, was a big juvenile star, and he's in a lot of movies, and really like him a lot. And he's so authentic in the movie. He really is he is really wonderful in the film. All the 3 guys, you get a whole kind of glimpse of 3 different type of cadets that are going through their trials and tribulations. See, part of the thing about both Annapolis and West Point is the fact that you have to get through your first year.
You have to prove yourself.
Yeah, where you're a plebe. You're a plebe. And the thing is, plebes have no rights whatsoever. You're lower than a dog.
Yeah.
You're lower than a dog, and the upperclassmen who are ahead of you, who all just went through the first year at Annapolis last year, where they had to be slaves. And they had to be slaves. They had to take all the razzing. They had to take all the routines that they made them do. You're just at the mercy of the upperclassmen, and they have to put up with it. So when they become upperclassmen the next year, then they got to give it to the plebe.
You have to pay it forward, because that's how you grow into the man that you're supposed to be. You go through these difficult things. If you can't go through that, how can you go through war?
Yeah, no, exactly. No. It's a real fun story. But the thing about it though is the 3 guys represent 3 different types of cadets. The other thing about it is it's also a football story, because these guys are all on the football team, and so in the case of Robert Young, he's like this great quarterback, and he doesn't give a damn about the Navy. He doesn't give a damn about any of this stuff. He just doesn't like the college that he was playing football for. So he ends up like punching out the coach, and there's all these different schools that possibly want him. And he realizes that he can really feather his own nest if he goes through Annapolis. He'll get a scholarship at Annapolis because of his football playing, and then he'll become an officer. He'll graduate an officer, and have a tremendous education and have a tremendous engineering career available to him because of everything he's learned. But his idea is to quit the Navy once he gets out of Annapolis and just go in the private sector.
He just wants to play football.
Yeah, he wants it for mercenary reasons. And there's a whole honor system. There's a whole there's just the tradition of the Navy. It's a religion, all right, at Annapolis, and they sell the religion in a really meaningful way. And he doesn't give a damn about that. He laughs at that. He thinks that's a joke. Then there's Tom Brown, who is the young son of incredibly rich industrialist. And he wants to be on the football team, and he's just a little guy. And so he can't play this kind of same positions that the other guys play, but he plays with more heart than anybody. And that's his whole thing going in. And then Jimmy Stewart is the exact opposite of Robert Young. He is just, his whole life is the Navy. His whole life is his dad teaching him about the Navy. And this has been his dream. And he's an enlisted man. So he actually is in the Navy and was on a ship and was an enlisted man, and then put in the papers to be accepted into the officer training school at Annapolis. And he was accepted.
Oh, he must have been so proud then.
Yeah, and there's this really nice moment at the beginning where he's being let off his ship because he worked, I think, in the boiler room or something like that. He's being let off his ship, and he's shaking hands with the captain of the ship, and he goes, "I got to tell you something, son. If I don't see you walking the officer's plank, when it comes back to reboard the ship, I will be greatly disappointed in you." He goes, "Well, you will, sir. You will."
Wow.
But it's pretty clear that and it's even said in the movie, that if Jimmy Stewart does not get through officers training, if he's kicked out of Annapolis for whatever reason, if he can't cut it, he'll just re-enlist in the Navy and just be an enlisted man his whole life.
Because it's his dream.
Because it's just being in the Navy is the only thing that matters to him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As Matt said, that they both, Robert Young and Jimmy Stewart, meet Florence Rice, who's lovely in the movie, and she's Tom Brown's sister, and then they're kind of vying for her affections through the whole movie. So they do Navy Blue and Gold, and it's a big hit. It's a big hit for MGM. The book was popular. The movie's popular. And this is the movie that officially made Jimmy Stewart not just a promising young leading man at MGM, but made him a top of the line star. Wow. It was that much of a hit. And when you see the movie, you can see why. And if you just jumping off from Jimmy Stewart in some of his big moments in the Capra films, you see them play out. You see early versions of them play out. His speech to Claude Rains about his dad in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. When he does the whole thing of like, well, he's looking at the letters and everything is lost. And he goes, well, I guess it's a lost cause. But we both knew a man who fought for lost causes. Wow. And you used to fight for lost causes, and I loved you for it. And I guess this is a lost cause. But I will continue fighting. If all of his lies fill this courtroom, I will keep fighting. He has his own version of that speech written by George Bruce in here, and it just rips your heart out. Just absolutely rips your heart out. Then, after that, one of my favorite independent producer of that time period is Edward Small, who did Man in the Iron Mask and Son of Monte Cristo, Count of Monte Cristo with Robert Downey. And then he went to a theater, saw Navy Blue and Gold, and thought it was amazing, and then got in touch with George Bruce and said, I want to do a version of that. Can you just basically do Navy Blue and Gold, except set it at West Point? And instead of being about football, can we make it about hockey? And can you make it a British guy? Which is like reversing the whole Yank and Oxford situation. Make it a British guy and who's entering West Point. And, I want a West Point version of Navy Blue and Gold. And George Bruce wrote that, and it's called The Duke of West Point.
Of course.
And that stars one of my favorite actors, Louis Hayward. It's the movie that actually made Louis Hayward a star. He got Man in the Iron Mask because of The Duke of West Point. Now, it's very, very similar to Navy Blue and Gold, except it's more lead actor centric. Louis Hayward is definitely more the star of it. But he's got two roommates. One of them is Tom Brown again, basically playing the same guy.
Oh my God.
Wow.
It's Tom Brown again. And then the other guy is Richard Carlson, who is much, much better as a younger man than he is in his 50s sci-fi leads, which he's just extremely colorless. You know, when I see him in the 50s, when I see him as a younger man in this, I go, hey, this guy's not so bad, you know? And then in that one, the girl, the Florence Rice character is played by a young Joan Fontaine.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Before Rebecca.
What I love about the movies that play at the cinema club specifically, and we talked about this a lot last week, was that you can kind of see like the seed for all these other movies that you love. And if you really love cinema and you start going back and back and back into history, you'll find, hey, I really love this movie. And this is the movie that made them the star. This is the movie that allowed this movie to be made. And it's such a special experience to be able to see something like this in a theater with people.
And, you know, the Navy Blue and Gold, it's a real gem. It's just very moving. It's just a very, very, very moving movie.
There's a really emotional story that comes full circle in the third act of this movie, which I won't give away, but it really, really touched me. And like Quentin was mentioning, the speech that Jimmy Stewart gives about sort of his legacy within the Navy and everything that his father meant to the Navy. It's definitely compelling stuff, and I really recommend this one. It's really a great movie.
People should make sure that they bring their tissues in, is what I'm hearing them, because this might be a tearjerker.
Yeah, I would say this movie could actually count as a pretty fucking great recruitment poster for the Navy.
That's why they're still watching it to this day. Exactly. Now, second on this double billing is Fast Company, which also stars Florence Rice.
Yes, Fast Company, especially as a Florence Rice double feature. She's done a lot of really terrific movies, and she's wonderful in almost every one of them. I'm a big, big fan of hers. But this is probably her biggest A movie that she is the lead. It's her and Melvin Douglas. And at the time, Thin Man was very, very popular. And then mystery movies were one of the big genres of the 40s. And then all of a sudden, mystery comedies became the big genre, especially the idea of a debonair, suave detective solving murder mysteries with his wisecracking either girlfriend or wife, helping him out. And we just showed one of the best versions of that at the Vista for a matinee just the other day, the Lone Wolf Spy Hunt with Warren Williams and Ida Lupino. That was it's a laugh riot as far as I'm concerned. Ida Lupino is just hysterical in the movie. Anyway, Fast Company is actually as good, and the whole setup is Melvin Douglas and Florence Rice play a married couple named Joel and Garda Sloan. Their job is they sell rare books. They have a little rare bookstore, and he's an expert on rare books. And she's his wife and his secretary, and you know, she's the Della Street to his Perry Mason, which means that she's actually kind of the brains of the outfit, putting everything together. But he's the kind of, you know, mad little genius who knows all the facts from all the different books that he's read, and they sell rare books and they collect rare books, and they're who you go to find.
They seem like they make a really great team.
They make a fantastic team, and he's also just absolutely magnificent amateur detective. And then they get involved in a murder mystery. They end up solving the case. It's so charming. She is just, I like Melvin Douglas in almost anything he does around this time. But to me, it really is Florence Rice is who makes, you know, the girl oftentimes has the better parts in these kind of movies. She's the funnier one. And she's just perfect in the film. She's a great, great Garda Sloan. Now, an interesting thing ended up happening. They ended up doing 2 more Joel and Garda Sloan movies, but they did them with different casts. They just kept recasting it. My guess is that Melvin Douglas didn't want to be trapped doing a bunch of Joel and Garda Sloan movies.
Because then he would have been shoehorned in, like, you are just this character, right?
Yeah, and that happened to him quite a bit. When they did the Lone Wolf Returns, he plays the Lone Wolf off of one of my other favorite actresses of the 30s, Gail Patrick. But he just does that one and then he's out. And then it's Warren Williams who does like a ton of them after that. So I think that that's what ended up happening. So they did another Joel and Garda Sloan movie with Robert Montgomery and Rosalind Russell. And I don't like Robert Montgomery that much. I don't think he owes a flickering birthday candle to Melvin Douglas in there. But Rosalind Russell's always really good. But it's just not as good as Fast Company. Then they did a third one, which is actually pretty funny. And that stars Franchot Tone, who I don't normally like, but he's actually not bad. But the thing is, the screenwriter is Harry Kurwitz, who's kind of famous for a lot of the Danny Kaye screenplays out there. But he wrote it under a pseudonym called Marco Page. And the thing about it was Fast Company was a little a pulp paperback, and I have the pulp paperback, and I've read it, and it's really really good, and it follows the movie pretty closely actually. He didn't write another novel, but I believe the second one is based on a pulp story he wrote for Argosy magazine.
Why did he use a pseudonym? Is it because it was more like a pulpy movie?
No, I think it was just the idea of sometimes they just, for financial reasons, they just decided to go by a different name as an author.
Interesting.
Maybe it could be for tax reasons, or maybe he had I'm just web spinning on this, but things like this happen. Maybe he had a contract.
All right,
with the studio, and so he writes a paperback novel under a different name, and then it gets published, and he's not breaking his contract.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very, very possible. Because sometimes you see people like change their name on a thing because they're not happy with it, but I don't.
No, that's not the case. No. Sometimes they just wanted to create another brand. They wanted to create. Oh no, let me get Marco Page out there.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'll be writing for two known authors.
And two good authors. Too.
Yes, exactly. So he's involved in all three of the movies, but he never wrote another novel, Joel and Garda, but he wrote a serialized story in Argosy magazine for one of the other ones.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I've got that too.
Let me ask, what was the methodology? Because if this is a Florence Rice tribute, what was the methodology of choosing these two movies?
I've got enough really cool Florence Rice movies to do an entire week of Florence Rice
if I wanted to. If you wanted to, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I might very well. Yeah. The methodology one was I wanted an excuse to show Navy Blue and Gold. It was Navy Blue and Gold that brought me to Florence Rice.
Oh, wow.
So it was like your introduction to her.
It was my introduction to her. And it was George Bruce that brought me to Navy Blue and Gold. And then that brought me to her. And I thought she was just really lovely in it. And then I was like, oh, well, let me see more movies with her. And so then I watched about like 6 different Florence Rice movies, and Fast Company was the A title that she did with another big star, where she is definitely the lead and the star, and she's just wonderful in it. But it's not even just them. Another one of my favorite actresses of this time, and again, this movie is the one that turned me on to her, is the bad girl in the movie, is played by an actress named Claire Dodd. And I became a huge fan of Claire Dodd after seeing her in this. And that put me on a Claire Dodd road. And she's my favorite of the actresses who played Della Street in the Warren Williams Perry Mason movies. She played Della Street in 2 of the Perry Mason movies.
It's all connected.
Well, that's like the thing. It's like if you want to be like Quentin and follow in the footsteps of discovering Florence Rice through Navy Blue and Gold and then entering into the A title of Fast Company, this is the perfect place to do it.
And, and in the cases like, I've seen Navy Blue and Gold now 3 times this year. All right. Once by myself, once again to just study it because I read the book.
Yeah.
And I wanted to now compare it to the book. And then with a good friend of mine in Tel Aviv, I showed it to him and he was in tears at the end of it.
Gala, I'm wondering if you know the other 2 movies in this sort of unofficial Fast trilogy. One of them is Fast and Loose, and the other one is actually Fast and Furious.
No way.
Which really predates, of course, the car series. And there's a 53 remake of Fast Company, and to avoid confusion, they had temporarily retitled this movie to be called The Rare Book Murder.
That's a great title, though.
That is a good title.
That's a really good title. Tickets are still available for Navy Blue and Gold and Fast Company on Tuesday the 26th at 2 p.m. Okay, moving on to Wednesday the 27th at 2 p.m. We have a movie that we have talked a little bit about through our calendar episodes in the past. We had it highlighted when we talked about the design of the calendar, but it's Fever Pitch on 16 millimeter.
I'm very excited about this one. The print is gorgeous. It has great color on this print. If you've never heard of this movie, it's from '85. It's the final film directed by Richard Brooks. And it stars Ryan O'Neal, who we all love, and Barry Lyndon and many other things, who kind of plays this straight-laced journalist who goes under a pseudonym of Mr. Green to write about the dangerous world of gambling. And I just love his performance in this movie because he's like this bright-eyed, just like curious investigator guy, and he gets sucked into this world of this glamorous Vegas degenerate gambling scene, and he ends up deep in his head in this like den of like old men and gambling sharks. And there's a lot of narration from him in this movie, but I think it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed watching it because in most gambling movies, you're kind of like with these guys who are really about this life, like Sandler in Uncut Gems. He is a degenerate. And in this movie, you're kind of seeing Ryan O'Neal lured down that path. He's starting it as a journalist, and
like he's doing an expose, and his expose is he's following this guy named Mr. Green, this degenerate gambler. What people don't know is that he's Mr. Green.
Yeah.
They don't know that he's writing about himself.
And he's to become Mr. Green to write about it.
It's a movie done in the 80s that has a 50s feel. And there is this aspect of Ryan O'Neal almost feels like a 50s actor in this film. And he's almost like a 50s character, and his narration has a 50s staccato appeal. And it's like the movie he did right after Tough Guys Don't Dance. And they both have this, he's playing this kind of out of time character in both movies. And so it was a perfect follow-up. Both me and Roger are big fans of, and not in an ironic way, all right, the way other people are. We actually like Tough Guys Don't Dance. Most people probably know this about me. And if you don't, you probably have figured it out from the way I've talked before. I am not a so bad it's good guy.
Oh, you're definitely not. You always, if you like something, you appreciate it.
Yeah, I am not one of those guys, and I don't like those guys.
I mean, Matt and I talked about this for Troll 2.
Yeah.
The Cinema Club is, in my opinion, anti what I call ironic consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. However, anytime you make a declarative statement like that, if you are good faith and of an elastic mind, part of the thing is there are exceptions to those, to every rule, to every cinematic rule. Fever Pitch is terrible. And it's so fucking funny. It is jaw-dropping how out of date it is. It's almost impossible that this got made in 1985. I've never been able to write about it because the only way to write about it would be to just recount the series of different ridiculous things that happened during the course of the movie. But then that's just being a snotty asshole. You need to actually experience them. Never has a movie, I've been waiting to talk about this movie for fucking 30 years, 40 years. And I'm at a loss.
Here's the floor, Quentin.
I'm at a loss. I have so much to say and I don't want to say too much. So I keep interrupting myself. This might be one of the most appropriate titles ever because the entire movie is set at a fever pitch, a literal fever pitch. It has the full-on substance of a Raleigh Hill alcoholism commercial. Don't take the car, you'll kill yourself! But for 90 minutes. It takes the addiction story done with the full melodramatic to the point of absurdity that you would see in the most flagrant 50s version of the movie and then present it in 1985 as if no time has passed at all. At fucking all.
I love that in order to look the part of a gambler, he literally just puts on a cowboy hat.
And it's just one crazy, absurd sequence after another showing his degradation into gambling. Okay, so I was going to recite one of them just to give you just an ever so kind of flavor. Let's see, what would it be? There's so many to choose from. Okay, I'll come up with one. Okay, I don't want to ruin anything, so I'll come up with just one. And by the way, I can come up with one because there's like 27 to choose from.
I cannot wait to
All
hear
this
this.
ridiculous.
I cannot
Okay.
wait.
All this ridiculous. But okay, so a flashback that he has that illustrates the grip of this monkey on his back is he's in a poker game, one of those all-night poker games. And he ends up losing. And he doesn't have the money because he expected to win. And they're going to break his neck. And so he calls up his wife and he says, honey, I got money in the safe. You got to bring it over here. You got to bring it to this hotel room right now. I mean, these guys are gonna fuck me up. I need the cash to pay them. And they go, okay, honey, I'm on the way. Naturally, it's raining cats and dogs that night. It's raining cats and dogs. And she's driving, and then she gets into a car crash.
Oh, God.
And then he gets the call. And he goes, your wife, she's in a terrible car crash. He goes, oh my God, I've got to go to her. They go, you're not going to leave. And then he picks the phone up and he starts whirling it over his head like it's nunchucks. And he like fights the guys off. He gets there. He shows up at the wreck. And it's like ambulances and bubblegum lights are going everywhere. And she's dying.
I shouldn't be laughing.
And no, you should be laughing because it's fucking ridiculous. And she's on a stretcher. And they're taking her into the ambulance, and it's rain's pouring out of the mall, and he comes to a honey, and she's got the bloody money in her hand. Did they hurt you? Here's the money. Here's the bloody money in her dying hand as he passes it off. And this is just one of 27 scenes in the movie that are like this. All done at the same pit of hysteria.
All done at the same fever pitch.
All done at the fever pitch. Now, why I like this movie, not just to just sit there and laugh at it, and where it goes into what Gala was saying about, well, no, if Quentin likes something, you know, there's a reason why he likes it.
There's a reason.
And there's a reason with this. As absurd as everything that happens in the movie is, as completely dated as the movie is, Richard Brooks, who I've never liked, he's probably my least favorite of these big type directors of from the 50s and 60s and 70s. Now, I've read but I'm the kind of guy who actually reads books about people I don't like. All right, so I've read a Richard Brooks book about his career, and anybody who adores Richard Brooks's career, they hate Fever Pitch.
Oh, interesting.
They consider it, oh my God, it's the travesty. It's the travesty of his career that he ended his career with this terrible, terrible movie that's just completely dated. This is so drastically my favorite Richard Brooks movie, I cannot tell you. This is the only Richard Brooks movie that I love. This is the only Richard Brooks movie I will defend against all comers. This is the only one I would own a 16 millimeter print of. I have the key video.
Of course you do.
Key video, yeah. But what this movie has is there's an explosion of technique in this film that I do not consider Richard Brooks a director of pizzazz style. He's not, and I'm not saying he's drab either, but you know, he's not one of the pizzazzy directors. He shoots it the way he shoots it. But this is not pretentious artiness. What's kind of amazing about the movie is it's crazy fast paced. It's got this hot staccato rhythm going all the way through it. And now from actually studying the movie, I think it's a situation where like he shot a ton of shit that he wasn't able to use. So he had a lot of footage. So he was able to create almost this fast-paced editing style that just keeps bursting through the movie because he has so much footage to go to. But the style that it recalls, the editing style it recalls, and this is a thing, is Russ Meyer.
Oh, like one of the greatest editors of all time.
Oh, well, one of the, yeah, absolutely. One of the great editor-directors of all time. I mean, as if Richard Brooks had never seen Beneath the Valley of the Dolls and watched it in pre-production. And thought it was the greatest edited movie of all time, which is as far as I'm concerned, it is a candidate for one of the greatest edited movies of all time.
And Vixen's editing is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the shot through the bed.
Yeah. But it has that flow.
Yeah.
That like
almost,
1,000 cuts a second kind of flow.
When you said staccato, you like captured that exactly because that's the feeling. It's just like fast.
It's literally Richard Brooks is using Russ Meyer as his guide.
He's channeling him.
He's channeling him in the ridiculousness of it, in the over-the-topness of it, in this like sensational, I mean, it's not as sensationally sexy as a Russ Meyer movie is.
What is, though?
Yeah, but what is? But for him it is, to some degree. The screening that I had with Jerry was it was an amazing screening because we didn't know what the fuck we were going to see. It's just a new movie that opened up that week. We sat there watching the movie with our jaw on the floor. We could not believe this movie was as absurd as it was. We couldn't believe he was doing it. We couldn't believe that, like, the studio didn't let him do it. I mean, it's obvious that he's making a movie for 1955 and 1985 and just hasn't realized, but he does realize. Looking for Mr. Goodbar does not feel like a 50s version of that story. I don't really care for Looking for Mr. Goodbar, but it actually feels very 70s. All right, it feels like it's time to some degree or another, especially with the disco soundtrack and everything. But no, he reverses. It makes Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend seem like a minimalistic study of alcoholism.
Well, I was reading that he actually was trying to make a film about tackling the gambling problem in America, and he became interested in that subject, and this is what he came up with.
Well, the thing is, the film also has this fantastic cast of characters that just like never stop. So you have Chad Everett completely recreating, like redefining his career, playing the asshole gambling bookie guy that breaks your kneecaps if you don't pay. And he's just ferocious in the film. You got him on one end, and then you have Giancarlo Giannini on the other end. It's like Charlie Madrid or something like that.
Yeah.
Who's the famous Monte Carlo gambler? He's the famous Italian guy that comes in there and bets $10,000 on one hand of baccarat. He's that guy. And then John Saxon is in it, and our old friend Catherine Hicks,
of course,
from Better Late Than Never.
Of course. One thing I like also, though, is that in Fever Pitch, like Navy Blue and Gold, we're having an eclectic cast of characters, but we're also having these are the archetypes of this. Like, here are the archetypes in the Navy. Here are the archetypes in gambling.
And the head gambler guy is actually really sinister. I love the what is
that's
class
Chad Everett.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, was a huge heartthrob TV star from the show Medical Center. And, women loved Chad Everett.
So was this a kind of a change of character? Then
it was completely a change. No one had
breaking.
ever seen him play a character like this before. Yeah. He had done a lot of the big TV stars of the 70s. A lot of TV movies, but he was always like the hero. He's always the handsome guy.
After this, did he continue on with villains, or did he kind of go back to heartthrobs? As a matter
of fact, for the most part, he did. What you'll remember him from, he's the guy that Naomi Watts does the scene opposite in Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, of course.
I'm at the time, I'm a huge fan of Fever Pitch, and like I said, one anti-gambling PSA. That's what it is. They're like it's like a 90-minute PSA, all done with the exact high fever pitch of a PSA.
Where people are like jumping out of windows and whipping phones around.
So he meets Catherine Hicks, who's a blackjack dealer. Well, no, she's a cocktail waitress, but she's also was a blackjack dealer or something like that. You ask, oh, so what brought you out to Vegas? What's going on? So then naturally you get a gigantic monologue about how her husband was a degenerate gambler. And then so she tells her entire life story in a 3-page monologue delivered at rapid pace. Her just selling it. The film, though, is so funny. It's so funny that it seems impossible that he didn't mean it to be a little funny. You know, it
because it's the tone of the movie.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, it shares that with Neil LaBlute's Wicker Man remake. Like, this has to be on purpose. The comedy, the absurdity has to be on purpose. It can't just be the left hand. It had to be on purpose. Well, turned out within a year of this movie coming out, so it came out in 85. So somewhere towards the end of 85, I started an acting class with the great Alan Garfield, aka also Alan Gorowitz. And so I was in Alan Garfield's class. And Catherine Hicks joined the class.
Oh, wow.
She was, oh, wow, well, a big actress is actually in our class. That was like kind of a big deal for, most of us are trying to just even get in the SAG. All right. And Catherine Hicks had played Marilyn Monroe in this big miniseries. So Alan had one of his parties at his Hollywood condo. And so I go to the party and we're all mulling around and Kathy Hicks is there. And I'm talking about stuff and I'm kind of being impressive. All right. I'm not so bad. All right. And so I start talking to Kathy Hicks about Fever Pitch. And lo and behold, I love it. I think it's amazing. She has no idea what I'm talking about.
Really?
She lived through a disaster. She thought she had worked with a big star with Ryan O'Neal and done a big movie with a famous director. And then like it opened and closed and it just was ripped apart by the critics. It was like a laughingstock. It was a laughingstock movie. And I go to, and Alan Garfield had seen it. Quentin, the movie's terrible. What are you talking about? Well, what did you think when you saw it, Alan? And he goes, I thought Richard Brooks is a good, wonderful old director who has not realized that movies have changed in the last 20 years. And he made a movie that would be perfect for 1956. Like, well, that's what's great about it. And I'm mentioning the Russ Meyer thing, and that's going over everybody's head. But I go to Kathy, and so I'm talking to Kathy about it, and she's loving the conversation.
Well, probably
she's
because it's the first time someone's ever said a good thing about it.
She's absolutely loving the conversation, and she's loving. I'm selling my passion, and I'm like a shook up soda can at that age. All right, when I was excited about something, and she's finding it all very charming. But then I say something, and I go, "But I mean, the movie is so funny. It's hysterically funny, and it is hysterically funny. There will be a ton of laughs in the audience." Mm-hmm. So I'm hitting that, and she goes, okay, Quentin, I need to stop you right there. There's one thing you just need to know, and you can feel the way you feel, and I'm happy about the way you feel. I think it's great. But one thing you need to know for your hypotheses, he did not mean this as comedy in any way, shape, or form. To him, this was the most serious movie he could possibly make.
Wow, really?
Nothing is meant to be funny. It's all meant to be tragic.
There's a couple other moments of this movie that I have to call out because, like you said, it's like a series of absurd vignettes. There's a scene at a gas station in this movie where this like enforcer guy comes out with like
William
a
Smith.
Cage retainer on his face
Well, not only that, that's one of my favorite actors of all time is William Smith. And it was actually kind of really depressing when I watched it because William Smith had always played like these great motorcycle bad guys or cowboy bad guys. And I always thought he should have been Charles Bronson. I always thought he should have, been the lead of action
he should have
movies.
ascended, yeah.
And part of the reason he didn't is because he was just so popular on television. He's like the bad guy on every TV show in the 70s that there is. And I think he would book himself up with a whole bunch of TV shows. And so the thing is, well, they're not going to give him the Bronson role in a movie if you can watch him get his ass kicked by Robert Urich on SWAT last Wednesday, and then with Hunter, and the next week, and then Simon and Simon, the week after that. Which, by the way, Simon and Simon is really good, because in the Simon and Simon episode, it's their version of Cape Fear, and he plays the Max Cady character, and he's fantastic, and he's fantastic, and he beats both of these guys' asses. It's really great. Anyway, finally, after all this time, there seemed to be this move in A movies to not play his standard bad guy role, and so John Milius cast him as Conan's father. And Conan the Barbarian. So he's the one at the beginning that gives Conan the riddle of steel. And then Milius cast him, and he steals the movie in Red Dawn. He's the Russian battle expert that they send to take care of the Wolverines. And he comes in, and and I remember I saw it sit around a dome, and all the black guys, hey, William Smith! Well, that's who you send to stop the Wolverines, is fucking William Smith.
He's the only guy tough enough to do it.
Then Coppola started using him. He's the cop. Who's after the motorcycle boy in Rumblefish.
Oh, yeah.
Motorcycle boy. It's the motorcycle boy. The motorcycle boy.
God,
That's the big interest in the pet store. I'm like, oh my God, he's working with Coppola. He was working with Milius. And then he became the star of his own TV show, a show called Wild Style, which was basically the A-Team set in the Old West. And so he's making this move, and then all of a sudden when he shows up in Fever Pitch, it's like as if nothing had happened, and he was right back to doing the leg breaker role. Mm-hmm.
He's like a henchman in one
scene. He's the enforcer guy that Chad Everett sends after you. And so it's like, oh, that's the cliched William Smith role that we'd seen forever in big movies. And so it was very disheartening.
Because you saw his trajectory up, and then all of a sudden it's like, here he is just being the enforcer again.
Yeah, and now, I mean, literally, it's as if this whole last 4 years of progress was just lost.
Yeah.
There's one other scene that is just so funny. I have to call it out. There's Gamblers Anonymous scenes in this movie, more towards the third act of the movie. But, you're hearing from all these different characters, other than Ryan O'Neal, various people whose lives have been broken by, someone in their family or themselves with a gambling addiction. And there's a scene where there's a kid whose father has a gambling addiction, and they ask him if he is ever capable of forgiving his father. And he says, I hate him, and someday I'm going to kill him. I think that moment is going to kill in this theater.
Well, if you want to come and see Fever Pitch, I have a low ticket alert. I think there is only one ticket left if it hasn't sold while we're recording. This, again, is on 16 millimeter. The print looks great. I'm so excited. And as Matt said, this is going to kill with an audience. And we
haven't even mentioned, frankly, along with the editing, the one aspect of the movie that is absolutely fantastic, did mean to work, and works beautifully, is Thomas Dolby's score. Thomas Dolby does the score, and it is amazing. His score is fantastic. It's partly the editing style, the never stopping staccato editing style, and the Thomas Dolby score that turns it into a Russ Meyer movie.
Again, that is Fever Pitch on 16 millimeter, playing Wednesday the 27th at 2 p.m. And there's a low ticket alert. So if you want a ticket, go ahead and head on over to
VistaTheaterHollywood.com
to get yours today. But if it is sold out, remember there is a standby line. You might be lucky enough to get on in. Next up, on Thursday the 28th at 6 p.m., happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We are going to be playing Alice's Restaurant on VHS.
So this one is one that I'm really excited about, but Jules programmed it. Woody Guthrie, the very famous folk singer, his son Arlo Guthrie stars in this movie. It's pretty much the only movie that he ever starred in, though he appeared in small parts and a couple other things more recently. So this is apparently based on a real-life thing that happened in Arlo Guthrie's life when he was 18 years old in the early 60s. And in this story, him and his friend go on Thanksgiving to help their friend Alice, who lives in a church.
It's a con man.
Yeah, they go to take the trash out of the church that she lives in. And they can't find a place to dump the trash, so they dump it on top another pile of trash. And he gets a phone call the next morning from Officer Obie, who's the local sheriff in town, asking if he did indeed dump the garbage there. And because he cannot tell a lie, he admits to dumping the garbage there, thinking it's going to be fine. What ends up happening is he ends up getting arrested and doing a night in jail for dumping the garbage there. Now, this little stint in jail ends up being the thing that prevents him from being drafted into the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And this is at a time when people his age, he was impossibly 20 years old when they were making this movie. People were being drafted into Nam all the time. So he and they were doing anything they could to get out of it. They were saying they had psychosis and, you know, that they had cancer and whatever it was to get out of doing it. And ironically, it was this littering incident that had him in jail for one night that prevented him from being drafted in Nam. So he goes, this happens to him in real life, allegedly, and then he writes a song about it called Alice's Restaurant Massacre.
It was one of the albums of its time.
Mm-hmm.
The Alice's Restaurant album was one of those albums that if you had youngish parents back then, everybody owned this album. I'm guessing that Alice's Restaurant is maybe the first movie based on a record album, but it was a smash hit. The album, people knew the song, and then they played a lot on radio, probably on FM and everything. But you didn't need to because people bought the album. Arthur Penn, coming hot off of Bonnie and Clyde, does the movie, cast Arlo Guthrie as the star. Arthur Penn got nominated for Best Director at the Academy Awards for Alice's Restaurant. I find it unfathomable that Arlo Guthrie didn't at least make one other movie
that he didn't continue
him.
on.
Yeah. I mean, he's really, really wonderful in it. And I kind of know him more like the way he was in the 80s when his dad was having his big revival in the 80s. And you saw him a lot then. And I'm like, I mean, he's such an adorable androgynous imp, right? In this movie, and all these girls are trying to get him, and you get why. This is like the Bob Dylan starring role that you never saw Bob Dylan do.
Wow.
during that time period.
Yeah, it's interesting because the song is just this kind of comedic takedown of the draft, and the movie only gets to what's going on in the song kind of in the third act, and they build this whole story around it where everyone is in love with Patricia Quinn, who plays Alice in the movie. And the thing that I found really kind of beautiful and touching about this is that Woody Guthrie, Arlo's dad, passed away in between the time that he wrote the song and when they made the movie, and they cast someone as Woody Guthrie on his deathbed in the movie. Mm-hmm. So there's these scenes where, you know, he's visiting his dying father, and it adds this kind of somber emotional element to, you know, what otherwise can be kind of a funny song and sort of this rebellion against the draft. So I thought this one was really great, and it's a great Thanksgiving movie too, because all of this is happening, the genesis of what's happening at least is happening on Thanksgiving.
For me also, though, like if I had to choose a era of war movie that I like, Vietnam War movies are always the ones that get me the most. And there's an interesting subgenre in Vietnam War movies, which are Vietnam draft dodging war movies. Yeah. And Alice's Restaurant fits into that. Another one that comes to mind is Hair. Yeah. Like the draft dodging scene in Hair.
Big Wednesday.
Big Wednesday
has a big, but the best of the going through the draft.
Yeah.
The showing up at the facility and going through the draft. The best version of that is in Alice's Restaurant.
And like you said, there's moments that he's just so pure and he's so fresh-faced in this movie. There's a moment where this girl who's too young for him throws herself at him. And you get that she just wants to collect items from guys that she slept with. And she's mentioning all these like singers that she's gotten with. And he kind of just wants to give her a souvenir, and he gives her his like neckerchief or something, but doesn't sleep with her. And you know, you get a sense that he's actually a really good guy in this movie.
If you'd like to get a seat at Alice's Restaurant on Thursday the 28th at 6 p.m., tickets are still available, and it's going to be played on this VHS box. It's a CBS box home video.
Yes, it is.
It's always, these are always like a nice heavy box from Video Archives. So you're going to be seeing it. It's going to be a great time.
Yes, it is a Video Archives tape, and it is tape number 1878.
Also, Matt just informed me that this is not available for streaming, so come on down.
Right on.
Hey guys, all this talk about Thanksgiving is getting me really hungry. I think it's time that we go for the lobby and have a snack break.
Good idea.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And we are back from the lobby. Hey, Quentin, what did you pick up for your snack?
It might be considered boring by some, but I always get Coopers.
Of course you do. I mean, it's funny because everyone always asks, like, what's Quentin's favorite snack and what's Roger's favorite snack? Quentin, it's Goobers. Roger, it is those dark chocolate Raisinets.
Yeah, I'm a big Goobers fan. I adore them.
Do you put them in your popcorn?
No, I don't do that. I've done that, but they're usually gone before the movie even starts.
Well, we have a very, very special movie up next, which is on Friday the 29th at 7 p.m. We have BoJest.
Yes.
Quentin, I think you should take us away with this one.
I really like. I've always been a big fan of both the story BoJest and the 1939 version of the movie with the William Wellman version with Gary Cooper. So much so that I even read the book. And this year, I'd never seen the silent movie version, and so this year I ended up watching the silent movie version, and I fell in love with it. I've discovered a lot of films this year, like this year particularly. I had like a real like discovery year of older cinema.
And that's one thing that you've been doing specifically on season 2 of the Video Archives podcast. We've always been trying to have at least one movie that you've never seen before.
Right. I had about at least 4 or 5 older film discoveries that just really, really rocked me. Navy Blue and Gold is one of them, actually. But to me, the most beautiful one is the silent version of BoJest. It's directed by now one of my favorite directors, which is Herbert Brennan. Also directed the silent version of Peter Pan,
which is playing tonight.
Yes, and that's like 2 of the most visually beautiful movies that I've ever seen, and he directed both of them. So now I'm a huge Herbert Brennan fan, and I'm looking forward to see even more of his movies. But BoJest just really destroyed me as far as the telling of the story is beautiful, the imagery is beautiful, and like what I said, while I like the story BoJest very much, I love the genre of the French Foreign Legion movie, and I love the accoutrement, the uniforms, and the fighting the desert tribes, and the one lone fort out in the middle of the Sahara, and cruelness of the authority figures, and the no man's land. Part of the thing about the French Foreign Legion is, even though it's French, they'll accept anybody. You can be from any nationality. They don't care. They don't care. And a lot of people, it's like a situation where they accept crooks. They're happy to accept crooks. So there's a lot of people, well, okay, you can either go to prison for the next 10 years, or you can be a legionnaire for the next 10 years. If you robbed a bank in Chicago and then go to Marseille, you can join the French Foreign Legion. There's a hysterical spoof that Laurel and Hardy do called Bo Hunks.
I know. I'm surprised before we started recording, Quentin was kind of telling me about all of the BoJest.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised at how much BoJest there was. And this is a movie that a lot of people have been writing into me about their love for BoJest. They don't live in Los Angeles, but they're like, wow, Quentin's playing BoJest.
And it's because they saw this
beautiful, beautiful program that has been faithfully recreated. And there's going to be pictures all over of this. But man,
yeah, it's from the premiere engagement at like the Cine Opera House. To have been there, I can only imagine, and you can imagine when you read that when you see the program,
and the color too, because it's in the painting and the blue in the inside. It's gorgeous. One thing about this movie I really love, Quentin, when you were mentioning it, it shows almost like the cruelty of man, but also like the cruelty of like the desert itself.
But there's also beauty in this movie. One, there's the beauty of silent film imagery, that it is just visual storytelling. You're being shown the movie. The visual storytelling is able to take this book and tell it to you in a really meaningful way, to the degree that there's actually poetry in the visuals. But along with the technique of the movie, it's about the love of brother for brother, because the story follows three brothers, the three Jest brothers. There's Beau Jest, John Jest, and Digby Jest. And they're played in the movie by Ronald Colman, who plays Beau Jest. Ralph Forbes, who was a big actor at that time, later married one of my favorite actresses from this time period, Ruth Chatterton, sort of the opposite number of Anne Harding. And then Digby, who's played by the wonderful Neil Hamilton. And if you're wondering, where have I heard the name Neil Hamilton before? He is Commissioner Gordon on the Adam West Batman TV series.
Of course. And we've talked actually weirdly in this calendar a lot about Batman, I think, just in
It
general.
keeps coming
just
up.
keeps on coming up.
So you want to see what he looks like when he was a young, handsome young lad. He's the young brother. He's Digby. If you're familiar with the 1939 version, Ronald Colman is playing the part that Gary Cooper played, and Ralph Forbes is playing the part that Ray Milland played, and Neil Hamilton is playing the part that Robert Preston played. The other huge character in the movie that is just an amazing character is the sadistic sergeant, played by Noah Berry Sr. in the movie. And it's one of those weird situations in the storytelling where you hate the guy. You fucking hate this guy. He's a sadistic son of a bitch. And he's zeroed in on the Jest brothers. He's going to destroy them, especially Beau. He's going to destroy Beau. And you hate him. But then they're attacked by like a surmassed Arab army where they all combine to take down the fort with impossible odds. Absolutely. They're dealing with like 1,000 Arabs, and they've got maybe less than 200 guys in the fort. All of a sudden, this sergeant, who you've hated through the whole movie, is the greatest soldier you've ever seen in your life. And the way he is conducting the battle, the way he is conducting the soldiers to fight, the way that he's making sure that the Arabs don't know how many of their men that they've killed. They keep like, no. Anybody who gets killed, you prop them up. You put them against the wall. They can't know how many they've killed.
They have to think that we have more men than we do.
That's exactly it. The Jest brothers hate this fucking guy. And there's a moment where Beau goes to John. He goes, this guy's the greatest soldier who's ever fucking lived. Oh my God, can you see what he's done? This is amazing. We're going to die tonight, but just to watch this is one of the greatest things in battle history, watching what this man is able to do. But along with the beautiful visuals that go along with this magnificent example of silent cinema is its treatment of brotherhood. And it's the treatment of the love of brother for brother. And the film starts off with an old Arab proverb, and it goes like this. The love of a man for a woman waxes and wanes like the moon, but the love of a brother for brother is steadfast as the stars and endures like the word of the prophet.
When I read that on screen, it set me up perfectly for the movie, because that's what this is all about. It's about brotherhood, especially because the reason why they've all enlisted in the Legionnaire, it's because there's been this gemstone that's gone missing. And I think they're kind of all pointing fingers at like who done it. It's all of you. You guys are all thieves. It's like the lowest of the low that you could do is take I think it's a sapphire.
Well, it's there's a whole big thing about it. So I don't want to go super into that, but it's an interesting thing about the story. It's one of those things where what would seem like a terrible crime because it's being stole from the woman who raised them, their aunt, it seems like a terrible crime, but actually it's the greatest gesture he could possibly do for the family. And the lead character, Ronald Colman, his name is Beau Jest, but there's a double meaning. One, his last name is Jest, and his first name is Beau, but but beau geste in French also means an honorable act. And that's who he is. That's exactly who he is. Ronald Colman is just fantastic in this movie. Beyond great. There will never be anybody who could ever play beau geste as good as Ronald Colman. You know, it's important that it is important that he's English. It's very, 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 very important that he's English. It put me on a whole Ronald Colman trip this whole year. And I was just recently at an Academy event recently, and Harvey Keitel was at the table with me. And then I just brought up, I go, Harvey, do you like Ronald Colman? And he goes, do I like Ronald Colman? Of course I like Ronald Colman. I mean, when I was a young man, I would try to watch every Ronald Colman movie I could ever see. If I could look like anybody, of any actor who ever lived, I would look like Ronald Colman. I go, do you like his voice? If I could sound like anybody, of any actor who ever lived, I would sound like Ronald Colman if I could.
Well, he has a very intense charisma about him.
Yeah.
And it comes through.
But, you know, one of the things, though, that was really shocking to me is Ronald Colman's voice is so distinctive. And I knew that he was a star in silent movies. And it never... like, why would you watch Ronald Colman if you couldn't hear him? I mean, that would, he's one of the great voices of cinema. Why would you, why watch him in a silent movie? I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about.
His eyes cut through you.
He is so fantastic in this movie. And I'm sorry if, like, every time I watch a movie that has a meaningful thing that that now that I'm a family man, I associate with my family. And so I have a boy and I have a beautiful young daughter. But after I watched beau geste, I would like Leo to have a brother.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I never had a brother. And the commitment of the brothers at the end is just so beautiful and just so heart-wrenching that it really makes, and I've always prided myself on being an only child. I took it as a strength. I took it, and I actually think it is.
Both you and my father are both only children. Yeah. And also because of that, you found brotherhood through friendship.
Absolutely we did. And with each other.
Yeah.
But when I watch beau geste, I feel like I missed out.
This beau geste program is extremely limited edition. There's only about 30 of them. Mm-hmm. And so if you buy a ticket and you come down to see beau geste.
To see this on a screen with an audience, I believe will be a cinematic treat. I can't talk enough about this movie. I've bought a bunch of paraphernalia about.
It's all over Quentin's house. It's like in the kitchen. It's in the living room.
I've bought original window cards, which we'll have some of them here. All right, I've bought all kinds of stuff, and then it was one of those things where, you know, Gala comes over to the house usually like twice a week. All right, to do our show. And then she just sees more beau geste stuff on the wall and more beau geste stuff. So you're kind of into a beau geste thing, right?
I remember there was one, and then it just started multiplying like tribbles all over the house.
Then I started getting more of the Gary Cooper stuff and whatever.
Finally, I was like, okay, what's up with this beau geste thing? Like, come on, Quentin, spill the beans.
And one of the things, though, is if you're a fan of the 1939 version, which is the version that they put on an American stamp. I saw the Gary Cooper version when I was a kid, all right, and on TV. And I liked the story then. The thing is, the William Wellman 1939 version is a shot-for-shot remake of the silent version. They loved the silent version. They didn't want a director to go do something else. They wanted, no, we want the silent version with sound. That's what we want. We just want talking. And so it's the same script. You could hear what's the same script because it's like taken from the dialogue's taken from the book. But like you watch it, it's the same setups. It's everything is exactly the same. You know, it's the great, magnificent battle scenes, magnificent dead French Foreign Legion iconography, magnificent battle attacks. Just, you know, the quintessential French Foreign Legion movie.
Again, this is Beau Jest, 1926's Beau Jest. It is silent and it is playing on Friday the 29th at 7 p.m. If you get a ticket, you will be getting one of these limited edition Beau Jest programs. Now for the midnight. Friday the 29th's midnight is Pink Floyd The Wall on VHS. Wow, look at that box. Oh, is that one of those little tray boxes?
Yeah,
oh, no.
it's one of the tray,
Oh,
one of the
it's a
MGM
book.
tray boxes.
It's a book box. It's one of the books.
Yeah, we have to call out the beautiful silver MGM big boxes. And this one calls Pink Floyd The Wall an all-out attack on the senses. Is a quote from New York Times.
Color it terrific. Pink Floyd's landmark album comes to life in a truly original rock movie that's destined to become a classic. With, quote, images so strong they overflow the screen, end quote. It's an unforgettable musical and visual experience, an all-out attack on the senses. Rock superstar Pink, played by Bob Geldof, has had too many shows, too much dope, and too much applause. Somewhere in Los Angeles, he sits in a locked hotel room, slowly going mad. Join him if you dare on his journey through the spiraling world of insanity where fantasy blends with reality in a nightmare mix that truly pits you up against the wall. Pink builds brick after brick in the wall until the night he brings a young groupie to the hotel and lets out all of his locked up emotions in a screeching climax that will rock your senses and carry you, along with Pink, over the edge. Conceived and written by Roger Waters, The Wall is brilliantly animated by Gerald Scarfe and directed by Alan Fame Parker. For me, it would be Alan Bugsy Malone Parker.
Yeah, right.
Run Like Hell, Comfortably Numb, and Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 are among the songs from one of the best-selling albums of all time. Said the Film Journal, The Wall is a powerhouse achievement, a masterpiece. Wow, they used the M word for it. An all-out attack on the senses. Wow. And again, this is tape number 956. It's an original Video Archives tape. This is a midnight movie for sure.
Mhm.
Can you ever even see The Wall when it's not midnight?
No, well, no, it was one of the, especially in the 80s, it was 80s and into the 90s. It was one of the obsequious. It was on every revival calendar, either playing at midnight or like they put it with Yellow Submarine or put it with Tommy or put it with some Zachariah or some other like Gonzo-y kind of movie.
It's all those like really, really good album movies that people probably are taking LSD and going to
Oh, no,
midnights.
absolutely. Actually, Margaret Cho used to do a really funny routine that she goes, yeah, I had to see The Wall with my mom.
Jules suggested this movie because we've never done a music movie in here before. And lo and behold, it was probably the first thing this whole month to sell out.
Well, you'll notice I haven't said anything. I would
Oh.
eat barbed wire before I would ever watch The Wall.
So this is not Quentin's pick of the month. Let's just say it.
No. I had no desire. I have no desire to listen to the album. I have no desire to ever see the film. I'm just not a fan. So,
well, Quentin, I haven't seen it yet. It's the Alan Parker movie that everyone keeps on telling me to see.
No. It's just especially for people of my generation. Especially for the Gen Xers, both the album but especially the movie, all right,
Yeah.
because most of them got into it. They were probably a little too young when the album came out, so they went for the phantasmagorical experience and to smoke pot, and it was one of those things where it was like most theaters showing it, you would smell pot in the air in the auditorium. Okay, but I never inhaled.
Well, you know what? A lot of people are because this show is sold out.
I'm sure it's sold out within a day.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
sold out like
quick.
immediately, like
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very quick. But as always, guys, remember there is a standby line. So if you're dying to get in to the Friday 29th midnight, you can also actually really interesting double feature pair it with Beau Jest. I don't know. I don't know what kind of night that would be.
Well,
A fun one.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like I don't feel bad about. Well, one, I'm not even talking bad about the movie because I haven't seen it. I just have no desire to see
Yeah.
it. All right, so I'm not even talking bad about it. It's just not. I'm not interested at all. All right, but like I don't even feel bad about saying that because it has enough fans. It doesn't need me.
Well, let's get on to, I think, the piece de resistance of this week. Actually, the piece de resistance of this month. And you heard us kind of mention this a little bit throughout the month. But we have a triple feature on Saturday, November 30th at 7 p.m. We are playing Bulldog Drummond Comes Back, A Tragedy at Midnight, and Texas Rangers Ride Again.
Which is a John Howard triple feature. Those of you who've been playing our home game of the Video Archive Cinema Club,
a lot of people are.
You'll know that we officially broke the ice with the theater by showing the John Howard Bulldog Drummond movies on our Tuesday 30s double features. And that's how that was our first official screening. And then we did it every Tuesday for that month. And it was our first open to the public screening. It was my first screening that I came down and talked to everybody before it started. And it was also that first screening particularly. But I mean, I felt that for I went to like most of them, but that first screening really let me know what we did here in a big way, in a big way, because I had different dreams for this place, and just using the little cinemas of Rue Champignon in Paris was kind of the jumping off point. But I know that the 20 people that were here in the middle of the day on a Tuesday it was at 1 or 2, I guess.
2.
At 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, they had no fucking idea what they were seeing. I'm sure if they had ever heard of Bulldog Drummond, it might have just been a name, a name of an old pulpy character that they maybe heard the name before, but like didn't really know who he was. And maybe they might have looked it up on IMDb, but they really knew fuck all about what they were going to go see. But it was just like, well, that little place is opening. Okay, well, let's just see what's going to happen. Let's just see what it is. And that was sort of the idea is, well, this is small enough. Doesn't take that many people to have a good screening here. And we ended up, I think, having most of the seats filled for that first screening. But even if like a quarter of the seats aren't full in this place, that's still enough people.
Well, that's the thing. It's small enough, but it's big enough.
Yeah, that's it. It's small enough and it's big enough to really get an audience and to really feel it. But I always I don't do it from the stage. I always do my introductions from the podium.
From the balcony.
Yeah, from the balcony, from the podium at the front door, looking down at the audience. And there was just something so touching that these random Los Angelinos who could have done anything in the world they wanted to do that day decided to watch these 2 Bulldog Drummond movies that I'm positive they knew fuck all about, just in the middle of the day, in the middle of the afternoon, because why not? And we had a great time. We had an absolutely great time. The films played like gangbusters, and we had a wonderful time. But then I kind of figured that was it. But then, golly, you started telling me that the whole Bulldog Drummond association with the theater started building. Could you go a little further on that?
I mean, Matt and I can probably talk about this,
Yeah,
but I actually started having people tell me my introduction to the theater was Bulldog Drummond. When are we playing more Bulldog Drummond movies? And Matt, didn't he kind of become the official mascot or the unofficial mascot for the theater?
I mean, yeah, there's something special that happens when you choose this to open the theater. And I think that just set the tone for some of the kind of movies that we want to see in here. And the way that I've kind of described to some people the mission statement of what's going on in here is that it's movies that you can't see anywhere else. It's movies that you've never seen with an audience before. I remember how delighted you were to watch it in here. And it's, again, a tribute to micro cinemas in Paris. So I think that this really checks all those boxes, and these movies are just so funny and so delightful and fun that this series sort of, in a way, carried the torch for everything else that we've shown in here. And people have come up to me over the last 8 months and asked, when are you going to do more Bulldog Drummond? Because I missed those and I heard great things about it. And
when we're going to have an evening show of it, all right? Enough of the matinee. Let's have an evening show.
And also on top of it,
and someone put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah, people put it on T-shirts.
Someone made a little TV to give to Quentin, and it's just like amazing that it has inspired fan art. This series from the 30s.
Let's describe this really nice, really like touching thing about the audience, and I thought that was it. All right,
It was just those people that came that day.
Yeah, I thought that was it, and so nothing could make me more tickled that both Bulldog Drummond and John Howard, that he's become the official or unofficial mascot, and that and people are demanding encore screenings, of those movies, and so with that in mind, I've always been a huge fan of John Howard, and then so finally this year I decided to do deep study on him, to find out his whole life story, what's going on with him, and to track down all the films in his filmography. And he worked for Paramount for a really long time, and so I've seen most of his movies now. I wanted to start it out with 3 wonderful films of his that show slightly different sides of him. I figured I should start it with the Bulldog Drummond movie, just to kind of like, it's this signature role
And give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want. Now we're going to finally have an evening screening of it. It's listed in the calendar that it's in VHS. However, I just recently got a 16 millimeter print. We haven't tested the print yet, but once we test it, all right, if it holds up to the test, then actually Bulldog Drummond Comes Back will be on 16 millimeter.
And the audience loves 16 millimeter.
Oh, they will buy a ticket to anything on 16, whether they know what it is or not. And in this case, it's already almost sold out. So very special treat.
And the thing is, this is his first of his Bulldog Drummond movies. It's him and John Barrymore are the 2 stars of it. And what's interesting is this character was first created on screen by our favorite Ronald Colman. So Ronald Colman played the quintessential Bulldog Drummond in the first Bulldog Drummond movie, and then he did a sequel to it, Bulldog Drummond Strikes Again, I think it's called. And then they did a couple of British versions, and then Paramount wants to do the series, and they're trying to figure out who the cast. They had already put Ray Milland in one version, but John Howard had a huge hit with playing Ronald Colman's brother in Lost Horizon. And he actually looks a bit like a road company Ronald Colman, a little bit, with his little mustache, and he's very debonair and he's very dashing. And he's the quintessential brother of Ronald Colman. He's like the perfect guy to play Ronald Colman's brother. And so since they're looking for a Ronald Colman-ish type for Bulldog Drummond, and they had John Howard under contract and were grooming him to be a leading man, especially in B movies, but that could have actually gone a slightly different way, but I'll talk about that on the night. They gave him Bulldog Drummond, and so we're starting officially with his first Bulldog Drummond movie. Then we go into Tragedy at Midnight, which may be one of the worst titles for a comedy I have ever heard in my life.
It's a comedy?
It's a comedy.
It's really funny too.
It's a really funny comedy.
It's like it's tonally incorrect title, but I guess
yeah.
What can
it's
you
like
do?
one of the worst titles for a comedy, A Tragedy at Midnight, I've ever. 3 to 4 years ago, when I discovered this movie, I was already a John Howard fan. But the reason I watched this wasn't because of John Howard. It's because of Margaret Lindsay. Because I love Margaret Lindsay. She's one of my, I don't know how many times I can say she's one of my favorite actresses of the 30s. But okay, Margaret Lindsay is also even better, actually, as many great movies as she did in the 30s. She's even better in the 40s. Her signature role, even though she's in everything, she's in Jezebel, she's in A Scarlet Street, she's in G-Men. All right, she acted 4 different times with Bette Davis. She acted 5 different times opposite James Cagney. A bunch of times off at Pat O'Brien. She was a big Warner Brothers gal. But she's kind of I consider her the queen of the mystery movies because she had big parts in standout movies of some of the different mystery series. So she's in one of the big Philo Vance movies. I think it was like the Case of the Dragon Pool or the Mystery of the Dragon Pool. She's she's in the first of the Crime Doctor movies. She starred in a few different Thin Man-ish kind of movie. In fact, she was sort of almost the go-to girl when they wanted to kind of do a Thin Manny kind of a movie because she's just wonderful with her male co-stars. And she's just wonderful as sassy, wisecracking partner. She's wonderful with Edmund Lowe in film that they do together. She's wonderful with Ralph Bellamy in a really good movie called Meet the Wildcat. And they're so good in that together that then she got her own mystery series, which she starred in a whole series of Ellery Queen movies with Ralph Bellamy, where she took the character of his bumbling secretary, Nikki Porter, and ended up taking over the series. It's like you watch the series for her. She's really, really funny. And she's almost like predates Lucille Ball on her TV show quite a bit as Nikki Porter. And I love all those movies, and I love them all because of Margaret Lindsay. I think she's just absolutely fantastic. So I was on a Margaret Lindsay kick, watching every Margaret Lindsay movie I could possibly see. But when I heard that, her and John Howard together, oh my gosh, that's the dream team.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's literally the dream team.
Like if you were fantasy casting this movie,
that would no, it would, and she's wonderful against all these guys. William Powell, she stars in Private Detective 62 alongside William Powell. So she's wonderful in all these things. But like her and John Howard together, post Ellery Queen, post Bulldog Drummond. Oh my goodness. Okay, perfect. And they are the dream team you could want them to be. They are so good. And now, look, part of it is John Howard. John Howard is wonderful with his female co-stars. And with every single one of them, he has this wonderful, wonderful chemistry. But I think there's something special about him and Margaret Lindsay. They are really so terrific together, but also their situation. They've got a great setup for like, the only problem with a tragedy at midnight is there's not 5 other movies with these characters playing these characters.
like you just want more and more.
You just want more of them. You just absolutely want more of them. So the whole deal of the premise of the story is the idea that John Howard has this, he's this big radio star, but his radio show, I don't remember the name of the character or the name of the show, but the premise of the show is he's the greatest detective in New York, and he's better than all the other cops. And so his thing is whatever the big crime of the week is, a diamond robbery, a bank robbery, a this, or that, or the other, is he's going to solve it on the air before the New York cops do.
Yeah.
And he just keeps doing it. And and the fucking NYPD hates him.
Because he's better than them.
Because he's better than them. And he just makes them look like a fool every Sunday night. And she's his wife. And she's just and like always, she's as much of the brains, in the outfit as he is. But then a woman is murdered and put in his bed. And she walks in and sees a woman in his bed and calls the house detective to come in because she's going to like brain him. And then she realizes that the woman's been murdered. And now they think he did it. She thought maybe he was cheating, but she knows he didn't kill this woman.
He wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, maybe he's telling the truth about everything. All right, because I know he didn't murder her. Somebody's obviously setting him up. And so now the big crime in New York that needs to be solved for this week before his radio show is the murder that he's wanted for.
Wow.
And not only is he going to solve it, he's going to solve it by the Sunday airing of his radio show.
Before the police do.
Yes, exactly. Well, the police feel it's already solved He did it.
That's why, because they just can't stand him.
And they are so charming together. I like her with all of her co-stars. They're just a dream team together. They are just really a dream team. And I would have been happy with any movie in this vein starring them. But these characters are particularly great. And the idea of the guy who saw, who's the weed up the cop's ass because of his radio show is just a really wonderful premise. And they just have a ball with it. And it's really terrific. Key Luke is also in it. I'm a big Key Luke fan.
Yeah.
Charlie Chan's #1 son. But Tragedy at Midnight is just it's a real gem. I think it's one of the gems of Margaret Lindsay's career and one of the gems of John Howard's starring career as well. And like I said, they're just really a dream team together. I just wish they had done 4 more movies playing this character.
What about Texas Rangers Ride Again, the last movie on this triple billing?
Yes. Okay. If there's any movie on this list that has a least inspiring title, then Texas Rangers Ride Again. I don't know what it could possibly be. It does not inspire you, all right, to think, oh, wow, I'm going to see a Western of this era. Let me see the one called Texas Rangers Ride Again. And there's also even just this, this weirdness of John Howard is starring in a Western. I mean, he just, now usually these guys, especially in the who were the stars of B movies, did every genre that there was. But Westerns seem a little offbeat for John Howard. There's a real debonair quality to the guy. I mean, you don't see Ronald Colman starring in Westerns.
No, you don't.
And so there's a little, he seems a lot out of this. It's not a normal fit. But even though it's not a normal fit, I didn't think that would be I didn't think that would be special to the movie. I actually thought, oh, well, no, they just plugged him in. And so I'm expecting, when I finally was able to track Texas Rangers Rides Again down, I'm expecting it to be a real standard B odor of its time period. Well, I should have known, I should have had faith in it because it's directed by James P. Hogan, who was the best of the B movie directors at Paramount. He directed the best of the Bulldog Drummond movies. He obviously really, really hit it off with John Howard. He directed about 3 other John Howard starring movies, aside from the best of the Bulldog Drummond ones. He didn't do Bulldog Drummond Comes Back, but he did all my other favorites. And he also directed my favorite of the Ellery Queen movies, starring Margaret Lindsay.
Yeah, so he's doing all your faves.
James P. Hogan, I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of him. And he was the best B movie director at Paramount. And I think that John Howard was the best of the B movie actors doing the second feature titles at Paramount at the time. And so this is one of the Hogan Howard collaborations. I watched Texas Rangers Ride Again, which stars John Howard, Ellen Drew, who is Dick Powell's leading lady in maybe my favorite Preston Sturges movie, which is Christmas in July. And she's in a lot of, and she's actually done quite a few movies. She's done a few movies with John Howard, and also Keem Tamaroff is one of the stars of it, and a very young, very shifty young Anthony Quinn is also in the movie. All this is a big buildup to me watching Texas Rangers Rides Again, and of all the John Howard movies I saw, this was absolutely the most surprising. It's really funny. It's a comedy. And it is a really witty comedy. It's really, really charming. Mm-hmm. It's really, really funny. But it's not a spoof. It's not a spoof. It's not a spoof of Western. Well, there's a little bit, but not really. Not really. It has a really good story that you actually really care about. This woman owns like a giant ranch. I mean, like a ranch that's like so big, it's almost like the size of a small state. And so she has like a ton of cattle, but like there's a whole Russell organization that is just robbing her blind. They're just robbing the cattle blind, and they just can't stop it. And she's had enough of it. And so she goes to the Texas Rangers, and they send a couple of Texas Rangers down there to figure out what's going on. And they figure out, look, this has got to be an inside job. It's got to be an inside job. So we're not going to find them by sending a couple of people who are known as Texas Rangers down there. What we got to do is we got to send these known Texas Rangers so they think that those are who we're sending down. And then we got to put up, and they're going to put up wanted posters for these two guys that are being that they're looking out for, that they're looking for. And the movie doesn't take place like during Western times. It takes place like when the movie was made. It takes place, I think, in the 40s, because they're all driving cars and everything. And so they set up that there's these two outlaws. The two outlaws are John Howard and his sidekick Broderick Crawford. And Broderick Crawford is really funny in the movie, and they're really great together. And then, in fact, Howard and Broderick Crawford do such a good job together that they put him in another one of John Howard's really, really good comedies, a movie called Tight Shoes, that stars him and Broderick Crawford, that's based on a Damon Runyon novel. And that's a really, really terrific movie, too. And I think they did that after they did Texas Rangers Right Again. But they're a really wonderful team. And so the idea is that they'll join the ranch, and everyone will know that they're crooks. And then maybe they can find they'll be able, because they have a bad reputation, they'll be able to suss out who's in on the job.
They're basically undercover cops.
Cops. Pretty obvious it's Anthony Quinn, pretty much from the first time you see him. All right, but it is Anthony Quinn. No, they let you know right away, as if you didn't know already. But this movie is just so charming. It's so funny. But when I say it's so funny, what's good about it is it's lightly funny. It doesn't have big laughs. It's just a lot of little laughs, a lot of humor, a lot of wit. It has a lot of wit, and it's really charming, and there's a lightness to it that's just keeps going on. And it's surprising, as light as it is, how you get caught up in the story, and how you really, really love the old lady.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, who runs the ranch. She's amazing, and she has these wonderful speeches that are just terrific.
She's just a funny person, and they're not doing jokes about her. She's just like this firecracker of a character.
Oh, she starts off just reading her employees the riot act, and it's a great monologue she gives. I mean, she is a tough broad.
You got to be in the Wild
Yeah.
West.
John Howard being slightly out of place in the movie ends up working just wonderful for the whole offbeat quality of the film. So this is not Rustler's Rhapsody. This is not a spoof on this type of movie. It actually has the power and the excitement and the entertainment value of a straight version of this, except it's not a straight version. It's just a whimsical, quixotic, humorous, lightly humorous version, but constantly lightly humorous. And it's a charmer. It's an absolute charmer.
Even the first time that John Howard shows up in the movie, which isn't even for the first few scenes, and of course,
no, he makes a really late. For the star, he makes a really late appearance in the film.
Right. But the first time he shows up, there's this great gag where he walks in the room and he doesn't know that he's wanted for being the Pecos kid, and he like turns around and realizes that he has a gun pointed at his back, and the owner of the saloon kind of backs the guys down. It has that subtle humor in it that I really appreciated.
I would say, yeah, it's one of the absolute unknown charmers of the whole schedule.
And that wraps up our great tribute to John Howard.
Yeah, this actually, there are still tickets available, but I have a low ticket alert out on this one. One ticket admits to all three features, and we have had people ask, if I can't get in for the first one, is there a chance that I can get in for the second or third one? There's always a chance. So if you really, really feel like you can wait and stand by, and you can see if there's a spot for you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, there is this awesome flyer that was made specifically for this triple feature.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to draw attention to this one because I know that it's one that's really important to you, and it's one that I've come to be a huge John Howard huge John Howard fan rather, by way of Bulldog Drummond, and I watched all three of these movies, and while I was already a big Bulldog Drummond head, it was a Tragedy at Midnight that I really, really liked as well. And I tried to prominently feature Margaret Lindsay's head on this ad because she's so great in it. So
I have a few different really, really cool stills from Tragedy at Midnight and Texas Rangers Rides Again. So part of my little John Howard collection, at least in regards to these three movies, will be on display here.
This flyer is available to anyone who comes to see any of the movies this week, right?
yes, we made a lot more of those flyers than there are tickets to this triple feature.
And I
So-
know that I have those people out there that collect the calendars and that collect the flyers. So make sure, even if you're not able to come to one of these movies this week, since it's a holiday week, come and get the flyer because you will be with us in spirit. That's not only this week at the Video Archive Cinema Club, but that also wraps up the month of November. Catch us next week where we will be bringing you a whole new month with a whole new set of movies. Remember, guys, patrons get this episode one day early for free over at patreon.com/videoarchives. And if you'd like to get your tickets to any of these shows, you can do so at
VistaTheaterHollywood.com.
And as always, follow them on Instagram at Video Archives Club for updates on showtimes and also format, because maybe we're going to be having another 16 screening this month, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd like to just point out, since we're wrapping up November and heading off into December, is at the New Beverly on the 2nd and the 3rd of this month, we're having, I think it may be the Los Angeles Cinema event of the last 5 years. We're showing the 1930 Gary Cooper version of The Spoilers, based on the Rex Beach novel, which has been made 4, if not 5 different times. A lot of people know of the 40s version, which is John Wayne and Marlene Dietrich and Randolph Scott. But this is the 1930 version with Gary Cooper playing the role that John Wayne later played, and Betty Compson, who was a huge silent film star at the time, playing the part that Marlene Dietrich played, and William Boyd playing the part that Randolph Scott played. And if the name William Boyd sounds familiar, you probably know him more by his alter ego, which is Hopalong Cassidy. And one of the things about every version of The Spoilers, so it takes place in Alaska, I think in Nome, and it's about gold prospectors in Alaska. And spoilers are the people that come in and you found gold, and then they figured out a way to legally steal your claim from you. What's interesting in all the different versions of the movie, it usually revolves around there's the love triangle between the hero and then the saloon girl and the main handsome, dashing bad guy. And so, like I said, in the 40s version, Randolph Scott plays that handsome, dashing bad guy.
And that he is.
Yeah. And in the 50s version, it's Ann Baxter is the saloon girl, and Jeff Chandler is the hero, and Rory Calhoun is the dashing bad guy. So part of the thing about the story, the staple of it is the hero and the bad guy is always a star. It's always like somebody who's famous for maybe never played a bad guy ever again, and a Western icon besides, who is always playing the bad guy. And there's even a third character, all right, the guy who plays the bouncer, all right, of the saloon, who's in love with the saloon girl, who's usually played by a guy who used to be a star and has kind of fallen down a little bit, and he has a thing. The reason that the movie is remade time and time and time again. Well, it's a really, really good story. This is another one I've read the novel of, because I've seen so many movie versions. I finally wanted to read the novel. And I was really surprised how similar and yet completely different they are. And the classic thing of the staple, the reason that people remake it again and again, the reason I would watch it again and again and again, aside from all that Alaska snow and gold dust shit. All right, is the movies always end with the hero and the bad guy getting into a magnificent fight that lasts the entire last reel of the movie. And the first time I ever saw the spoilers was the 50s version. And it was on the big Western movie. And I was spending a summer with my aunt, who I couldn't stand. But they watched Westerns all Saturday. And so I'm just sort of like kind of halfway watching this movie that's on television. But then the fight breaks out. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I watching? This is kind of amazing. This is really, really fantastic. And then I saw the 40s version. And I'm like, wow, this is great. In Pauline Kael's book, 5001 Nights at the Movies, with her capsule reviews of films, she has a capsule review of the John Wayne version. And she doesn't really care for it that much. And she didn't really care for any John Wayne movie that much. So she's kind of like, nah, they don't quite know what to do with this is during that period where they didn't really know what to do with Marlene Dietrich that much. And I don't really care for John Wayne. He's a football player looking for his marks, you know. But she makes a point. She goes, now people seem to really, really like the end fight sequence, but it doesn't hold a candle to the fight sequence that ends the Gary Cooper version. Now, here's the thing. There is probably hardly anybody alive in 2024 who has seen the 30s version. The only version of this movie that is in existence in any way, shape, or form is this 35 millimeter print that they have at the Library of Congress. And the Library of Congress is letting us borrow it so we can show it. I can't even believe they're doing it.
That is spectacular.
And I found it from like searching like hell for it. TCM does not have it. Paramount does not have it. Universal, that bought all of Paramount's movies, doesn't have it. I remember I ended up talking to the people at Universal. And they go, well, no, that's a Paramount movie. Well, wait a minute. I thought you bought all of Paramount's movies from that era. We did. And we got them all. Except that one.
Wow. Oh my God. This is why it is the film experience of the last 5 years.
I mean, like I was talking with Elvis Mitchell about it, who's just as excited about as I am about seeing this film. And again, like I said, not only have I not seen it, I've seen every other version of the spoilers, but I haven't seen this version. And actually, frankly, Gary Cooper seems like the perfect guy for the film. And I'm also a big Betty Compton fan too, so I'm really looking forward to that. I brought it up to Elvis, and I said the whole thing about like there's hardly probably anybody alive. He goes, I would bet that there's nobody alive. We knew people who were alive, you know, even 8 years ago, but they're dead now. And
the whole generation has kind of turned over.
Yeah, this is your chance. This is your chance to see a seminal movie, and apparently one of the greatest fight scenes ever recorded on cinema. And one of the things about the fight, and I've seen many images of, you can buy posters of images of the fight. I've seen the posters that you can get on eBay and everything that the companies do that are amazing. And Gary Cooper, and you know, in the fights between him and William Boyd, Hopalong Cassidy, and Gary Cooper hurt himself so bad on the fight that he was never quite the same.
Wow.
He suffered from injuries of this fight for the rest of his life.
He gave it his all.
Yeah.
Well, that is December 2nd and 3rd at the New Beverly Cinema. I believe there's 4 showings of it. I think that it's like 7:30 both days, and then like a late, like a 10:30 showing. You guys just heard it. You may never have another chance to see this movie in your lifetime. So go ahead. Head on over to thenewbev.com, 7165 Beverly Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, and get your tickets because this is going to be an experience.
And we have a special thing, but we're not going to say what it is. But we have a special little thing that we're doing after the movie is over. That's a special little little thing for people who show up, but you'll just have to be there to get it.
Quentin, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It was just so special to have you, especially to talk about the 2 days I was so happy for you to be here with Bojest, because I know how much you love it.
Yeah.
And then also this triple, because just you needed to be here for it.
I agree. I appreciate that we were it all worked out that I was able to get here.
It was like kismet. So I'm just so happy. So thanks, guys. And we will see you next week.
Okay. Ta-ta for now.
Thanks for coming.
This calendar episode was produced by the Video Archives podcast and hosted by Gala Avery and Matt Landsman. Additional audio editing by Eric Clapp. Find even more of Video Archives on our Patreon, patreon.com/videoarchives. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.